I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. Another Super Bowl and another controversy over a commercial, this time involving a Bible verse. Plus, is God rooting for the Packers or the Steelers? A couple of priests with more than a passing interest give us their insight.
God is rooting for everybody to play to their best ability, to play fair, and nobody to get hurt. That's all he's looking for.
Plus, Catholic Schools Week is coming to a close, and we go into the deep to talk about it.
They're the best instrument the church has for passing on the faith to new generations. I think they get an A+ there.
Well, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. You know, in just 2 days, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Green Bay Packers will go head-to-head in what some might argue is the greatest show in sports. It is Super Bowl Sunday coming up here in just a couple of days. And you know, there are really two kinds of people in this world. Those who watch the Super Bowl for the football, of course, and those who watch the Super Bowl for the commercials. And there's one particular commercial that's already got people talking.
Fourth down. They need about 2 yards to keep this drive alive. Let's go.
Look at that. Leave him on the ground.
Completely dominating.
John 3:16.
What's that?
I don't know. I've seen it before.
I'll look it up.
Thomas knocks him down and he helps him right back up.
Johnson's going to be seeing eye black in his sleep.
Well, the commercial encourages viewers to visit a website explaining one of the most widely quoted verses from the Bible, John 3:16. It says, of course, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life." Well, John 3:16 has been as much a part of football as chips and wings. You see it on signs, you see it on shirts, and one year you even saw it on quarterback Tim Tebow's eye black. But Fox Sports has decided there's one place you won't see it, and that's during this Sunday's Super Bowl commercial breaks. And we contacted Fox for their side of the story. Here is what they told us. They said, quote, "As a matter of policy, Fox Broadcasting Company does not accept advertising from religious organizations for the purpose of advancing particular beliefs or practices. The Fixed Point Foundation was provided with our guidelines prior to their submission of storyboards for our review. Upon examination, the advertising submitted clearly delivers a religious message and as a result has been rejected." Well, joining me now to discuss this controversy is the executive director of Fixed Point Foundation. He's the man behind the ad, Larry Taunton. Larry, thanks so much for being here today.
Delight to be with you, Matt.
Well, first question kind of out of the gate here, the implication there from Fox Sports is that you guys kind of knew the policy up front and maybe we're trying to pull a bit of a fast one on them there. What do you say to that?
Well, there's two things I want to say. First of all, that Fox Sports could not have been more gracious. They were very professional. We enjoyed all our dealings with them. Second of all, the person who's issued this statement does not know the chronology. I'm not accusing them of being disingenuous, but just simply of not knowing the facts. The day after last year's Super Bowl, I spoke to the vice president of Fox Sports. We were the very first entity to submit a Super Bowl ad. I spoke to him, and he indicated to me, I shared with him the idea, the concept, and he indicated to me very, very honestly, he said, I'm not sure that Fox Sports would air the kind of ad that you're talking about. And he had mentioned the Tebow ad, which wasn't aired on Fox. That was another network last year. And he said, we wouldn't have aired that. He said, however, you do have a point. John 3:16 is a part of the culture of football, and he kind of indicated our policies are nuanced enough that I think that there's a possibility we could air your ad. So we began a several months-long process whereby we prepared our storyboards, we sent them in, and we had numerous conversations with Fox. In other words, it wasn't simply that they said from the beginning, there's no point in you submitting anything because it'll be rejected. They told us, they didn't tell us anything of the sort. They told us it would be an uphill battle, but that it was worth pursuing. On June of last year is when they rejected it. And when we came back and said, could we make modifications? Could we do anything? No, it's over. You can't submit it on the grounds that it contains religious doctrine.
Yeah. Well, do you think that was a fair or unfair decision in the end when it comes right down to it? I mean, it looks like they they gave you the opportunity and they said, well, here, give it a shot, but you didn't make it. Do you think that the decision in the end was unfair?
I believe that private corporations, entities have a right to set their own policies. So do I think that Fox Sports has the right to choose what does or doesn't go on their own programming? No, I think they do have that right, and I would certainly extend that to them. So we don't see Fox Sports as the enemy here, but I also think I'm free to criticize policies like this. And I would simply point out to Fox Sports, or to make a much broader commentary, Matt, because, again, I think Fox is simply reflecting the mood of the culture here. We have become such a shallow people that we really don't want substantive discussion and dialogue on anything. Rather, what we would prefer to have are commercials that are selling products via highly sexualized means, trailers to movies that are occasionally horrifying to children, frightening, violent. That's deemed to be okay. Commercials that encourage irresponsible drinking, all of that is deemed to be okay. And your viewers, if they go to lookup316.com, that's lookup316.com, they can see the ad there. We leave it to viewers to make up their own minds as to whether or not John 3:16 contains a message that's worth investing in.
All right, Larry, really quickly here, just before we have to wrap up, do you think maybe Fox's decision could have been a blessing in disguise because it's brought a lot of attention to this ad that it might not otherwise have had?
Well, Matt, are you suggesting that we had a different agenda here? I'm just having a little fun. The answer is, for us, we didn't set out to produce an ad that would be rejected. Not that you were suggesting that. I mean, when people watch it, they'll see that this is clearly not over the top or offensive, and most of the media has taken that position. However, for us, the Super Bowl or a Super Bowl commercial was a means to an end. Our ultimate goal is the glorification of God. And if we can focus a culture and generate a healthy cultural dialogue on John 3:16, however that's achieved via them accepting the ad or rejecting it, we're fine with that, and we think that has been achieved thanks to good people like you having us on your show. All
right. Well, we're glad to have you here, Larry Taunton. Thanks so much for joining us here on Currents. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Take care.
Well, and stay tuned. There's much more Currents coming up. When we return, could Hosni Mubarak be out of Egypt sooner than he planned? We'll have that story and the rest of the day's headlines coming up next. But first, as we wrap up Catholic Schools Week, we wanted to hear about Catholic education from the people to whom it means the most. So we visited St. Pancras School in Glendale, Queens, and throughout tonight's show, you'll get to hear what they had to say.
You get to learn everything you need to survive the next world once you're an adult.
We learn our morals and our ethics, as well as a well-rounded education.
There's so many. I mean, I could name 100.
Get to learn more about religion, more than public school, kind of.
They really care of your future and how you're going to be when you grow up.
The teachers teach us better than in public school.
You get to learn mathematics, you get to learn grammar, language arts, you get to learn reading, you get better in everything.
More special activities like gym or art.
And sometimes the teacher could take you to confession and you learn religion and it makes you a nice person.
Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up later, will the Steelers or Packers be getting any help from above on Sunday? We get some answers, but first, let's look at the day's headlines. It was a day of departure in Egypt, where protesters continued their calls for President Hosni Mubarak to exit office. People took to the streets for an 11th straight day. Protests in one of Cairo's main public squares were noticeably more peaceful, with demonstrators playing music, dancing, and shouting "Down with the dictator." Meanwhile, Coptic Christians say they're increasingly concerned about being persecuted if a new government in Egypt has a strong fundamentalist Islamic influence. Reports say a number of Christians are hoping for a slow, steady transition to keep Mubarak, perceived to be friendly toward Christians, in power as long as possible. The Vatican, meanwhile, has announced that dialogue between the Catholic and Anglican churches will resume in May. The Anglican Roman Catholic International Commission will examine some of the tougher issues keeping the two churches apart. According to a statement, the commission brings together members from a variety of theological disciplines. Meanwhile, a Catholic bishop in England says he's holding off on plans to cut the number of masses in his diocese because of an influx of former Anglican priests. Well, Vatican officials have announced that the church will issue a new set of biomedical guidelines later this year. An official says Catholic healthcare facilities are confronting a culture of death after controversy over a Catholic hospital in Phoenix performing an abortion in 2009. Late last year, Phoenix Bishop Thomas Olmsted stripped that hospital of its Catholic affiliation. And the Vatican has announced that the Pope is not an organ donor. The Pope's secretary explained that the pontiff cannot donate organs because his body belongs to the whole church. He said the church's tradition is that the Pope's body be buried intact to reflect the possibility of future veneration. Now, the questions arose after a German doctor began promoting organ donation, citing then Joseph Ratzinger's enlistment in a donor program more than 30 years ago. Well, back here in New York, the state's Catholic Conference says Governor Cuomo's budget proposal treats Catholic schools unfairly. In a statement, the conference says the governor is proposing cutting reimbursement to religious and private schools by 8%, while public schools would see a smaller cut. The reimbursements apply to programs and mandates that the state normally pays for. An update now in the case of a Philadelphia abortion doctor accused of murder. The Archdiocese of Philadelphia has set aside a potential gravesite for the estimated hundreds of late-term babies that Dr. Kermit Gosnell is believed to have murdered. A bishop from Philadelphia says every effort will be made to identify babies as individuals and bury them that way. Reports say the babies, along with body parts from some victims, were stored in jars and containers throughout Gosnell's office. He was indicted on only 8 counts of murder, as most of his records had been destroyed. Prosecutors are reportedly debating whether to seek the death penalty. NASA has confirmed that astronaut Mark Kelly, the husband of the wounded Arizona Congresswoman, will fly the Space Shuttle Endeavour's final mission. Kelly said in a statement that he's resuming training for the mission, which is scheduled to launch in April. His wife, Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, was wounded when a gunman opened fire at an event she was hosting in Tucson, Arizona. Yesterday in Washington, Kelly gave the closing prayer at the National Prayer Breakfast. He said his wife's condition continues to improve. And while many will be glued to the television on Super Bowl Sunday, a number of churches here in the U.S. will be talking about pornography. More than 300 churches will take part in a national effort focusing on pornography addiction. The churches will show a video featuring current and former NFL players talking about their struggles. According to the website for the event, the goal is to get people talking and to get help for people struggling with pornography and sex addiction. Well, stay tuned. There's much more currents ahead. When we return, we wrap up Catholic Schools Week and we ask, what's an education? Bishop DiMarzio goes into the deep to talk about that. But first, let's hear more about education and Catholic schools from students at St. Pancras in Glendale, Queens.
We enjoy Catholic school. I enjoy being here, especially at St. Pancras, because it's family. It's like a big family.
And I think it trained the kids for a better future.
I like the safe environment, the education, one-on-one with the teachers, smaller classes.
There's not too many public schools out there that have science and social studies every day until they're in the junior high level.
So I wanted them to experience the presence of the church in their lives and the people of the church, the priests, nuns when you have them and so on. I wanted all that to be part of their upbringing, just to pretty much have the same upbringing I had.
But you do make ends meet. You do turn around and you sacrifice part of your life to have a good education for your child to move up for the future.
Welcome back. As we've been telling you throughout the show, today is the last day of Catholic Schools Week, a time to look at what sets Catholic education apart from the competition. That's the subject of tonight's Into the Deep with Bishop DiMarzio. But first, I asked him about his recent trip to the Holy Land. Bishop DiMarzio, thanks for joining us here once again.
Good to be here again.
Well, you just actually got back from a trip to Israel.
Yes.
I understand. And tell us, first of all, before we get to the main meat of our subject matter here for today's interview, how people there are reacting to what's going on in Egypt right now.
Well, there's a lot of anxiety, obviously, because Egypt was at peace with Israel, and now if a regime change takes place, there might be a possibility of some change of the attitude. So they're very anxious, and again, they're kind of used to this kind of uncertainty, but that's the atmosphere I found there.
Yeah. Well, moving on now to Catholic Schools Week, which is what we're sitting down to talk about today, kind of wrapping up Catholic Schools Week now, but the sort of the theme of Catholic Schools Week has been Catholic Schools A+ for America. What areas do you see Catholic schools as really scoring a grade of A+ in your book?
Well, certainly they're the best instrument the church has for passing on the faith to new generations. I think they get an A+ there. And I think also they get an A+ on the academic prowess that they also have. So it's a winning situation, I think. I would say I would give them A+ all over. Obviously, some schools might have trouble sometimes in one area or another, but in general, I would say you've got a very high A for most of our schools.
There you go. Well, what is it that sets Catholic schools apart from other sort of forms of education?
Well, because it's a formation. It's just not education. It's formation. It's a moral formation. It's an intellectual formation. It's something more than you get at any other school. That's the thesis on which we operate, and I think clearly for the 150 years that Catholic schools have been part of our experience, we've done that. Certainly, we have less students in Catholic schools today for many reasons, but I still believe Catholic schools are the best thing we have.
Well, of course, the president just recently gave his State of the Union address. What would you say is maybe the state of Catholic schools here in the Diocese of Brooklyn?
I think we're healthy. I think we passed a crisis period where we had to consolidate schools. Now we're working on making our schools academies where we'll concentrate on the academic, but also on the support of the community for the schools. And that's the main, I think, issue confronting us. We have to see that the communities themselves have to support the schools. It just can't be every parish alone. It's sometimes very difficult. But if we get a couple of parishes together and we get the community behind it, we have a better team that can support all the Catholic schools are.
The new House Speaker, John Boehner, just recently announced his support of legislation that would sort of reinstitute a school voucher program. What would that mean for Catholic education?
I think that would be a real boost because it would allow parents to receive a voucher to use at the school of their choice, whether it be a charter school, Catholic school, private school, whatever it would be. And that would be a great thing because that's really what we need in our country, because the monopoly of public education is not a good one. I don't think any monopoly is a good one, but the public education monopoly has not allowed itself to be tested against other measures. And I think when we have many people trying to do the same thing, it's going to help everybody do better and not go back to the least common denominator.
Yeah, little healthy competition there.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, speaking of a little healthy competition, just before we wrap up here, another big game is coming up, the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
Are you going to be watching or maybe rooting for a particular team?
I'm going to watch. I'm not going to declare myself. It's always dangerous to be a bishop and declare yourself who you want. But I'm watching.
This is true. You know, they usually have the bishop of one city and the bishop
yeah,
of the other,
we
so they'll have those wagers, going back and forth. So
we don't have that problem.
Right. Absolutely. Well, you know, maybe when the Brooklyn Nets get moved in, you can have a wager going on. They'll make it to a championship or something. Bishop DiMarzio, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Right.
Always great to have the bishop here. I had to get a question in about the big game. You know, the bishop's very smart, though, not to pick sides. We'll have more on the Super Bowl coming up here on Currents, but first, some more thoughts from students in Queens on what they appreciate about Catholic education.
Yes, I think the money that we put into school is very nice.
Absolutely.
I would, because I want them to have the same experience as I did, and I think Catholic schools are better than public.
I would send my kids to Catholic school because I want them to follow after me.
Yes, I will.
Yep, I will.
Yeah, because I want them to have a lot of fun and learning the same way as I am.
Because they would get farther in life. I'd send them to Catholic school because I want them to worship God and to show them the religion.
Yes.
Yeah.
And plus you got a lot out of it. Catholic Schools Week, dress down days, they're just all worth it along with that little education you get.
Well, finally tonight, we just heard that Bishop DiMarzio will not be picking sides in the Super Bowl this weekend. Probably pretty smart for a bishop. But I was still curious to see if maybe God was going to be rooting for the Packers or the Steelers. To help answer that question, I spoke today with two men in the know. They are the Packers team chaplain, Father Jim Baraniak, and Brooklyn priest and self-proclaimed Steelers superfan, Father Ed Kaczurka.
Matt?
Hey, is this Father Jim?
Yes, that's correct.
Hey, Father, how's it going?
Hello, Matt. How are you?
Good, thanks for joining us. Okay, Father, I'm going to start off with the big question right up front here. It's the one on everybody's mind. Do you think God is a football fan?
Well, I'm glad you asked it that way, Matt. I don't know if I would say he's a Pittsburgh Steelers fan or a Green Bay Packer fan, but I do think he's a football fan for sure.
Hey, Father.
Hey, how are you?
How's it going?
Good to see you. What's going on?
Good to see you, too. Thanks for coming by in the cold weather here.
You're welcome. Hey, it's Steeler playoff weather.
That's right. Is God a football fan?
I believe he is, because the simple fact is that people are given certain gifts, abilities, and talents, and they use them to their best abilities.
Well, with the big game, of course, coming up on Sunday, who do you think God's rooting for, if anybody?
God is rooting for everybody to play to their best ability, to play fair, and nobody to get hurt. That's all he's looking for.
Well, I'd like to think, seeing, the church asks us to wear green 32 or 33 weeks out of the year. Green and gold is being worn in churches all over the world this weekend, I think. So that's got to be pretty telling, huh?
Yeah, I love it. Obviously, I mean, you've got the jersey on, you've got the cap on.
Yep.
Other than that, why are you the person in the Brooklyn Diocese to be talking to about the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Well, I've been a Pittsburgh Steelers fan since 1964, long before Terry Bradshaw and Mean Joe Green and terrible towels and everything. Was because I was watching football game with my father and my uncles, and they got me to understand what football was all about. So as we were watching the game, they said, now who are you going to root for? And I said, who are the underdogs? And they said, the Steelers. They're the doormat of the NFL. And I said, well, that's my team from now on.
And I think part of the Green Bay Packers' success is none of these guys have really been copping a pose. You know what I mean? None of them have been pointing at themselves. It's a selfless spirit, in a sense.
Why should God root for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Well, I got a better idea. There's a joke somebody sent me on the internet a couple of days ago, and it said that Tom Brady had died and had gone to heaven. Instead of being escorted into heaven by St. Peter, he was escorted by Jesus himself. All of a sudden, Brady sees this huge mansion with Steeler flags and banners and everything all over it, hanging, blowing in the wind and everything. And there's a small little house, and Jesus says to Tom Brady, this is where you're going to live. And Brady goes, well, why is it that I'm going to be living there? Who lives in that big house over? And he goes, Jesus says, I live there.
I think the Gospels are constantly holding up the underdog. You know what I mean? And who doesn't like an underdog? Even though we are favored by points, look at our size. Literally, Matt, there will be more people in the Cowboys Stadium on Sunday than there are people in Green Bay.
The Steelers are the underdog for the Super Bowl. They're 2.5-point underdogs. So I guess God's rooting for the Steelers then.
Any tips for me?
Yeah. Maybe you can help us out on the sidelines next time.
I'll plan on doing that. All right, Father, one last question here before I let you go. Do you think you can score me a ticket? Father? Father? Hello? Oh, well. Can you blame a guy for trying? Oh, well. Well, that is it for tonight. Remember, we're always online over at CurrentsNY.net. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night and a great weekend.